Good morning. I'd like to call our meeting to order. This is the in-person Community and Neighborhood Enhancement Advisory Board meeting for February 7th, 2020. This is our first meeting in 2022, excuse me. Like to see if we have a quorum. Good. Like to welcome Kim Hickerson to our group. Welcome, Kim. Thank you for being here. Let's see, our meeting starts with approval of our meeting minutes from last December 6th, 2021. It's been moved and seconded. Please cast your vote. Michael.
How would you like to vote on the minutes? How would you like to vote on the minutes?
Last minutes, yes. Very good. It's been moved, approved on approving our minutes from last meeting. Number 3, items from consideration. 3A is street resurfacing project.
Good morning. Welcome to the February Community and Neighborhood Enhancement Advisory Board meeting. I'd like to begin by echoing Mr. McKnight's sentiments. We welcome you, Ms. Hickerson. Thanks to you and the rest of the board for your commitment to the citizens of Oklahoma City. In addition, we would like to introduce 2 new staff members. Justin Henry and Sasha McCrone have joined the planning department and will be working as transportation planners. In addition to normal project updates in each of the categories, we will have preliminary reports for the Automobile Alley Street Enhancement Project and the Villa North Bicycle Infrastructure Project. As always, please stop us if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Our first slide shows the allocation status for each category after the board's actions at the December meeting. Both trails and bicycle infrastructure went down slightly with the closing of several projects in those categories. Those actions set the stage for staff to bring new projects back to the board for funding consideration, and we plan to do so at your next meeting. Item 3A1 kicks off today's project updates. The street resurfacing map reflects significant progress in the construction of both arterial and residential street resurfacing projects. To date, the board has approved 126 arterial projects and 20 residential projects. The only projects in design at this time are the 8 projects approved in December, and they appear in blue on the map. The red identifies projects currently in construction, while the green represents completed work. One item of note, the Arterial Street Resurfacing Project on Southeast 29th from Eastern to Bryant was recently selected as a Silver Award winner in the Concrete Pavement Restoration category. Moving on to item 3B1, the status of projects shown on the street enhancement project map reflects the extensive planning and design that goes into developing appropriate solutions to meet the needs of the various areas and districts across Oklahoma City. As you will hear shortly, the 10th and Vermont intersection project is the only street enhancement project to be finished thus far, with the 39th Street project approximately 80% complete. At the December meeting, the board encouraged staff to evaluate the 10th and Meridian projects for possible expansion, and we expect to bring ideas for additional pedestrian accommodations to the next meeting. Plaza, Paseo, Walker, Portland, and Stockyards are all in the design phase, with heavy coordination efforts with district leaders and individual stakeholders ongoing. Summer has been targeted for bidding and contract award on all 5 of those projects. The preliminary report for Automobile Alley will be presented for the board's consideration this morning, and we anticipate bringing the same report for Britton Old Town to your next meeting. Northeast 23rd Street is the only project not experiencing forward momentum at present, and even it has been reviewed with area leaders to better identify needs and possible solutions. As stated in previous meetings, staff plans to bring forth recommendations regarding possible additional funding for Northeast 23rd during a conversation on a second excess collections distribution. Item 3B2 is a status report for the Northwest 10th and Vermont Street Enhancement Project. As I mentioned earlier, this project was the first street enhancement project to be completed. Our planning team members had worked with area leaders to identify a large number of pedestrians crossing Northwest 10th, unprotected from the south side of the road to the retail area on the north. The application to install a signalized mid-block crossing at Northwest 10th and Vermont was approved by the Traffic Commission on December 16th, 2019. Because the project was well funded for the originally identified scope, we were able to extend the sidewalk all the way west to Meridian, provide a connection to an enhanced bus shelter in the same general area, and create a gate out the back side of the apartments onto the new sidewalk. The project was completed under budget, and staff will bring back the balance of funding to the board as a budget closeout to allow the excess funding to be allocated to another project. This is a project staff and area leaders believe addressed an ongoing safety issue for citizens, and we hope the board feels the result is consistent with your vision for a better, safer street.
If I may jump in on that one, this is just fantastic to see the first street enhancement project complete here. There's so much good about it. The aspect that there was some budget to go above and beyond scope to connect to the bus stop. The fundamental aspect where the project itself is to connect people and residences to a commercial shopping district. So it's good for business while keeping people safe. And on top of all of that, 40% under budget. It's just awesome, the fact that we can have safe streets in a cost-effective way.
Well, and again, just a lot of acknowledgement for Susan Atkinson from the planning department, who did the initial outreach, identified the problem, and really worked with area leaders on a solution. She did a wonderful job.
Yeah, she did.
Item 3B3 introduces the first of 2 preliminary reports we will present for your consideration today. The Automobile Alley Street Enhancement Project was one of the second group of street enhancement projects approved by the board. We are fortunate to have the engineering firm of Smith Roberts Baldesweiler as our lead on this project, and Ryan Smith and Craig Wallace are in attendance today in case you have questions for them. We are also blessed to have strong leadership from both the planning department and area stakeholders, and the latter group includes representation from downtown OKC, property owners, and merchants. Smith Roberts Baldesweiler was presented a twofold task. The first was to deliver a conceptual design that could be implemented over time as resources are available. The second was to develop a specific plan that addressed the imminent needs of the district that could be executed with the project funding allocated by this board. Automobile Alley currently enjoys as strong an identity as any of the districts in Oklahoma City. It offers a day-to-day vitality that draws visitors and residents alike, and it is particularly known for the distinct lighting that surrounds the buildings at Christmas time. But in examining the needs of the districts, of the district, leaders never strayed from their concern for the challenges presented to pedestrians by the inconsistency in the roadway design, including both lane configuration and parking arrangement. In response, Ryan and Craig employed a strong roster of industry professionals to perform a traffic analysis and opportunity assessment for the area. The result of that study recommended 3 primary changes that are evidenced in the next 2 slides. Number 1, the establishment of 2 northbound and 2 southbound lanes along Broadway through the district. Number 2, the standardization of angled parking along the west edge of Broadway. And number 3, the expansion of corner bump outs at all intersections on Broadway to shorten the distance pedestrians are required to cross. In addition, pedestrian-oriented signalization at all intersections will take advantage of the resulting consistency created by the above-mentioned measures. The district identified their priority limits of work as Broadway from Northwest 10th to Northwest 4th. The fixed limit of construction for the project is $1,350,000. It is believed that this level of approved funding will likely construct 4 to 5 blocks of street enhancements as I have described. The plans will be structured so that transitions can be provided at the junctions of any improved and unaltered location. It is also worth noting that the board has approved a resurfacing project in the same general area, and the combination of the 2 efforts will further improve the area. With that, I will welcome any questions or comments you might have.
Yeah, I've got a few, if we don't mind. I was reading through the preliminary report, and with regard to the 4-lane configuration, I think I saw that the plan to maintain traffic levels in some sense, or smoothness, is to eliminate left and right, or left turns. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So the current left turn lanes that exist at some intersections would become 2 northbound and 2 southbound lanes, so not a dedicated left turn lane.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. I know just for my commute to daycare by the YMCA downtown, there is a fair amount of traffic looking to turn onto 5th or 6th to then merge onto the highway or come off the highway, as well as just turning off of 10th into Midtown. How would restricting or eliminating the possibility for left turns result in, say, drivers having to go out of their way to make 3 right turns or take alternate routes onto, say, Oklahoma or Robinson?
I think the traffic study identified that there was not a significant loss of service as long as the timing of the intersections were addressed appropriately. There actually were a couple of different configurations examined, Mr. Carfang. One was essentially a 3-lane section and one was a 4. And it did perform better as a 4, and there was not a significant loss of service over what exists today.
Okay, so looking through, I've got the report pulled up that I'm looking at right now, and I think on page 20, looking at the traffic data, both the 3-lane and the 4-lane capacity options support well over 25,000 vehicles per day when current levels are 8 to 10,000. So even then it seems excessive. So for just doing north-south, 2 north-south lanes, FHWA guidance and ACOG's Complete Streets policy and Tulsa's or INCOG's traffic count suggestions for 10,000 vehicles per day is 2 lanes instead of 4. The alternative concept of the 3-lane configuration plus a common turn lane still seem to meet or even improve upon current level of service. Can we clarify as to why there's so much desire to eliminate left turn traffic? One of my major concerns is Oklahoma has a bike lane. I use it fairly regularly. Robinson is very pleasant to bike on as well. and automobile alley, not so much. So if drivers need to take a different route in order to get to where they want to go, as opposed to just get through the corridor, I'm worried there's going to be spillover into the preferred bike routes.
Ryan Smith, SRB. Thank you for the question, Anthony. One of the primary concerns with this particular project was pedestrian safety. By eliminating the left turn lanes, we can create a straighter corridor through this on Broadway, right? So currently, you've got a lot of lane tapers on Broadway to accommodate these dedicated left turn lanes. This impacts not only the inconsistency in the parking, but also the crossing distance at each of these intersections. So there was certainly some give and take. We were trying to balance not only the traffic volumes and what the street can handle, but also the pedestrian concerns as well. We felt like the trade-off was well within what we could accept, and this is supported by the traffic report. I'm not sure if I fully answered your question there. Is there a follow-up that would be helpful?
Yeah, so I certainly agree that the current configuration where it goes from 4 lanes to potentially 5 in some places for those dedicated left turn lanes, that inconsistency is a problem, both for drivers and for pedestrians, the lack of expectation and smoothness. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Concept 2, however, seems to have that straightness to it, while still enhancing level of service over what we have today. Now, there is an aspect where drivers turning left tend to not look for pedestrians who would be crossing streets as often, so I can agree to some sense that eliminating left turns altogether would help. I'd postulate that further we should eliminate right turns, or at least right turns on red in the area. But beyond, I think one of my other concerns of having 2 straight lanes in each direction with no left turning traffic leads to the potential for drivers to treat it like a raceway. So if the lights are timed well, or if they just happen to get through the lights, knowing that there's not going to be any sudden stopping to turn left, it's going to invite people speeding. And we saw this throughout the country during COVID, during 2020, where fewer vehicles on the road or less need to be interrupted led to higher fatality rates despite the fewer vehicle miles traveled. So I'm heavily concerned about the potential for that aspect. It's not so much about wanting to get cars through a corridor in a really streamlined way. It's about speed management as well. And I think the left turns not only allow the drivers to go where they want to go, but it also influences some level of heightened awareness and modulating speed. So I'm strongly in favor of concept 2.
Okay. I don't know that I can speak to the data you suggested regarding additional fatalities from higher rates of speed. I can speak to this as far as just from a traffic perspective. The 4-lane section as opposed to concept 2, the 3-lane section, the 4-lane section did outperform the 3-lane section slightly in terms of traffic volumes and things like that. There were some concerns about going to a 3-lane with your morning rush hour commute traffic. So there are a lot of vehicles traveling down Broadway south in the morning, and this is particularly important to companies such as companies that are in the downtown business district. And I think that was one of the primary concerns from Public Works, that they did not want to restrict or even give the perception of restricting access to the business district during the morning rush hour.
I get that. So backing up, the primary concern with this project was over and above everything else, enhancing pedestrian safety, right? Concept Looking at, this is table 8 in the report on page 23, looking at the traffic analysis for delay in seconds per vehicle or level of service, there are a couple of elements that are highlighted where, looking at eastbound 10th Street, the existing network shows 103 seconds of delay or level of service F. Concept 1, 34 seconds, level C, so much better. But here's the big thing, concept 2, 88 seconds of delay, still level F, but 15 seconds better than current conditions. So if our objective is let's enhance pedestrian safety, why are we also trying to enhance traffic car management so much more? I think concept 2 meets all the goals in an even better way that focuses on safety.
In assessing, I don't know if I'm going to satisfactorily answer your question, but in assessing these traffic reports, we have to look at it from more of a macroscopic level and not focus solely on one level of service. There are some advantages to the 3-lane. I will give you that. Overall, the 4-lane does provide a better level of service for this corridor, while still, in my opinion, meeting all of the goals of pedestrian safety.
I'm not wholly convinced there that safety could be better, could be just as easily met with concept 1. I'm still heavily favoring from a safety perspective concept 2, which again still enhances level of service over today's level, so drivers should be happy about that. I am heavily concerned about the restriction on left turns resulting in overflow traffic onto Oklahoma, which has a bike lane and bike route. There's Robinson, which is in Bike Walk OKC as a bike route as well. And I'd rather, if we're not doing a cycle track down Automobile Alley, I'm not exactly thrilled about spillover traffic onto those other routes.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, Eric Winger, Public Works Director for Oklahoma City. A couple of items just for clarification. So the elimination in the concept of the dedicated left turn lane does not eliminate the ability to left turn. So we're not putting in a no left turn sign. So cars can still turn left on Broadway, turning east and west. So what effect happens with the 4-lane section that's being recommended is there is the possibility that cars will back up in that inside lane, but you can still pass to the right if somebody was choosing to turn left. Vice versa, northbound in Broadway, we actually have a streetcar that's very active, and eliminating that down to a single northbound lane could cause tremendous backup at each of the stops. So we had to take that into consideration as well from a Public Works perspective, and making sure that we had 2 northbound lanes so that when the streetcar stopped to drop off and pick up passengers, we had the ability for vehicular traffic and emergency vehicles to still pass on the left in the absence of a turn lane or a center lane. So a lot of these things went into the level of service study. This is a lot of the things that the engineer had basically reported back to us. Both options actually can work, but the 4-lane option that's being recommended actually works best from a variety of levels. I think the biggest thing that we were looking for in the elimination of the turn lanes, and Public Works had a lot of conversation about this with a lot of our staff, it will reduce the level of service for left turners. But the advantage is that it narrows those intersections down immensely by removing that lane and shortening that crossing distance for pedestrians, which was one of the stakeholders' #1 considerations in the area. So it is a compromise. It compromises traffic, but it also improves the pedestrian safety aspect. It's going to be a significant change. So obviously the study has done as best it can to explain that, but some of this is going to be learned once we actually have the project constructed. So there's going to be some re-education on how you turn left on Broadway. There's going to be a re-education on whether or not maybe we do need to install a no turn on red scenario. We're also going to be looking very closely at the signal timings to make sure that there's reduced impact, but also pedestrian enhancement. And some of those things are going to come at the final plans. We're just not quite ready to present those in today's preliminary report. So the concept today is to at least seek your guidance and your approval on the concept before we move the project forward. But there is a set of final plans that will actually put all the rest of the details in before we actually put it into place. I hope that clarifies some. So I just want to clarify the left turns. We want to make sure we clarify the crossing distances at the intersections, and that the plan is a compromise. It is one that is better for the district from some of the goals that were established for enhanced pedestrian crossings at each of the intersections on Broadway.
Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate that clarification on the left turns. And I definitely love the curb bump outs and the reduced pedestrian crossing distances throughout. That is huge. I do still think there's merit to the dedicated left turn lane in concept 2. So this would be one southbound dedicated Broadway traffic lane, a combination of either direction having a dedicated left turn lane, and then 2 northbound lanes. The aspect of having that dedicated left turn lane there does reduce the amount of potential collision points. I think the FHWA guidance shows that it reduces potential conflict points from 17 down to 8 or something to that effect. So there's still some more merit there in my mind, as opposed to the 4-lane arterials that we see throughout town.
As someone who drives a car every day and drives this corridor quite often, it is really difficult for me to, though I'm on it many times, it's so confusing the way it is. One of the things that I find about this is a retail district. This is where long ago that wanted to enhance retail. We have angled parking, which I think is a wonderful idea, and I do think that the decreasing the space between the pedestrian and walking is great. I mean, I'm sure it's an issue with the left turn lanes, but this is also an area that we have a lot of people from out of town, and it's confusing for me. It must be confusing for them. I think that the 2 lanes each direction is so much simpler for them to deal with, and I think the angled parking in itself is going to be such an improvement. So, you know, I'm sure that there are other issues with this, but as someone who's taking a different point of view as a driver of a vehicle, I find this a great improvement, just in terms of less confusion on all the lanes that are there now. Right now, it is just kind of where are we today? And so I think it's a good compromise. If it's a compromise, fine. That's the world is made of compromises.
Is there an area that we've done this left turn lane, but you can still turn left? Is there a prior example where this has been implemented and successfully done?
So there are some intersections that in Oklahoma City that get approved by the Traffic Commission for traffic signals that don't have dedicated turn lanes with them. Not any that I can think of that are specific to the downtown area as a conversion to a no left turn, dedicated left turn scenario. But there are, living on the south side of Oklahoma City, I can tell you that on Southwest 104th Street between Penn and Western, you've got a signalized intersection there that is for a very large neighborhood that does not have the dedicated turn lane. And there's other scenarios where we have that in Oklahoma City as well. The idea being that we want to protect, again, pedestrians and traffic, but there's just not the right-of-way available to also include that turn lane at that same location. So there are some in Oklahoma City. I could get you a broader list of those if that's helpful, but there are some.
Some off the top of my head in my neck of the woods would be 23rd Street, turning onto Walker or turning onto Chartel. That is 2 lanes in each direction. There is that center median, which makes it slightly different than here, but 2 lanes in each direction, and there are cars that turn left at the stoplight. And we all love how easily that allows traffic to flow. Compare that with a difference of, say, 1 lane in each direction and a common center turn lane like we have down Walker on the south side that gets the person turning left out of the flow lane, which reduces the chance of rear ends. It reduces the amount of traffic backing up. It's great for level of service. And for traffic counts on Broadway, that would be a very acceptable solution. The only difference on Broadway is you also have streetcar tracks. So the 3-lane option doesn't quite work. I think there's a lot of merit to concept 2, and I think it's definitely worth more discussion rather than just going forward on concept 1.
One comment I would offer on Walker Avenue South, and the dedicated turn lane on Walker southbound had more to do with the number of business access and driveways than it did at the intersections themselves. So we do still have on Walker Avenue dedicated turn lanes southbound, but the continuous center turn lane was actually because of the number of businesses with active driveways and parking lots. So we do look at the street enhancement projects each individually based on their needs. We also look at those projects based on stakeholder input, and when we're looking at Automobile Alley, there were a number of meetings that really went through a lot of these details. And so just know that the recommendation being brought forth to you today for the Automobile Alley is one that has a level of support from the stakeholders in the district, and then one that the engineer has presented to you that merits, at least from a traffic study perspective, something that is workable and something that could move forward. But we are at the request for your recommendation today and happy to answer any additional questions.
So I would like to touch a little bit back on the idea of compromise in design. Again, circling back to the primary idea of the street enhancement is to enhance pedestrian safety. And looking through the survey questions at the stakeholder outreach meetings, I didn't see anything in this report that suggested the stakeholders are interested in improving pedestrian safety as long as we don't interfere with drivers' convenience. Was that something that was discussed? Were there aspects of the stakeholders really wanting to emphasize stakeholder convenience or driver convenience?
I show this, it says 78% of respondents listed pedestrian safety and security as the most important challenge to address as part of this project.
Which is different than, say, let's do pedestrian safety as long as we don't compromise on drivers' convenience.
And I don't think that was a consideration. Excuse me, I'm Craig Wallace. I'm also with SRB. I'm principal there. And the questionnaire was very critical for us to review the stakeholders and make sure that we address those concerns. And so pedestrian safety was number one. There was a no except as long as you don't. So all of the stakeholders that either replied to the survey and or in the construction meetings that we had as part of the stakeholders meetings, pedestrian safety continues to be the key element of this enhancement. And so based on the traffic study, based on the level of service for the traffic, based on, as Mr. Johnson said, the alignment of the traffic coming through, this was the option that we presented is option one, based off of all the information.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate that. And so to clarify my points a little bit more, concept 2 maintains that straight configuration, so we still have ease of driver expectation, and based on the traffic data here, it still enhances traffic or car level of service over today's standards. So concept 2, just in my mind, merits more analysis or discussion.
However, I don't believe there's any improved pedestrian safety from concept 2 as opposed to concept 1. And I would encourage everyone just to read through the decision matrix that was developed for concept 1 and concept 2, comparing the two options. I think that lays out the reasoning for choosing concept 1 over concept 2, and not just solely putting it on this one item.
Sure, and with regard to the aspect of the common center turn lane, I experience this as I'm trying to walk my daughter in her stroller across the street, or she is of age to walk herself, and she certainly doesn't walk at 3.5 feet per second as the standards might suggest you do analysis on. So that center turn lane, not having through traffic blast through, provides some potential respite to help get across. It means as I'm biking or as I'm trying to cross the street, I only have to ensure for the most part that the first lane is clear until I get there. It's easier to find that balance. If we jump down to the pedestrian worksheets, the guidelines for pedestrian crossing treatments, there's a lot of interesting stuff that I'd love to walk through line by line. But the big aspects in estimating pedestrian delay, there's a pedestrian crossing distance parameter, which makes sense. There's a pedestrian walking speed. The suggested speed is 3.5 feet per second, which is typical for an adult male as opposed to an elderly woman with a walker or a person pushing a stroller with a baby while carrying bags. There's the startup time and stopping time for pedestrians, a critical gap required for crossing. And here's the bottom line I want to get to. The average pedestrian delay on this particular intersection I'm looking at is, this is 7th Street and Broadway. The average pedestrian delay based on current traffic rates is 7,054 seconds, which works out to about 2 hours before they would get a clear shot across all 4 lanes of traffic. So here we are debating the level of service merits between two concepts that have a difference in about 40 seconds to a motorist versus an average pedestrian delay expected to be about 2 hours. Now, certainly a pedestrian might go down a block to get a light and cross again and then walk the block back, but there's an interesting aspect in this. There's an interesting set of values portrayed by this level of analysis.
The crossing distance between concept 1 and concept 2 are identical.
Sure.
You are suggesting using a center turn lane as a respite, and that is absolutely unacceptable. That would never fly. That is not okay.
I'm not insisting necessarily that we put in a median where they could. That's something that may be worth considering. But from crash data throughout the country, it's clearly much more challenging for, say, a motorist jumping across 4 lanes of traffic to analyze 4 lanes of traffic in different directions to find a gap, versus being able to, consider, say, somebody driving eastbound on 7th to turn north onto Broadway, making a left turn there without a signal. They could, in theory, cross 1 lane of traffic and get into that center turn lane before finding a gap in that next merge. That's fundamentally how most people drive. That's how research has panned out throughout the country on anything related to a 3-lane reconfiguration. I would love to talk with you more about this.
Absolutely.
If there's no further discussion, this does require a vote to receive this preliminary report.
I do have one more question, and Mr. Wenger, this might be more directed towards you. With regard to the topic of parking in this area, I saw a note that the parking spaces, the diagonal parking, is to be expanded from 18-foot length to 20-foot length. Is that accurate?
So what part of the report? So I can tell you that we've got parking depth standards, and if that's related to the parking depths, then the answer is yes.
Okay. I think I saw it earlier in the report regarding parking that the diagonal parking would be expanded by 2 feet, and that 2 feet would be gained by taking it out of the curb line from the sidewalk.
Okay. So Public Works for the past year has been working on some new on-street parking standards for use by consultants citywide. We have been doing some pilot studies in years past, and when Automobile Alley was originally striped to its current configuration, I believe they probably were striped to about 18-foot depths. What we found with our new study is that 20 feet is more prudent for the types of vehicles in Oklahoma City, also more safe for those that are backing out of those spaces so that they don't cross the center line when actually pulling out to then pull forward. And so if that's what's shown in the report, then it includes the most recent standard of 20 feet.
Okay. Is there an option instead to consider 20-foot parallel parking spots? It strikes me as extremely odd that when the priority is to enhance walkability and pedestrian safety, we're going to take sidewalk space to update the parking space depth.
So the angle parking provides a lot more parking spaces than parallel parking can provide. And again, I think as we started the conversation, when we looked at the stakeholders, they were trying to maximize that parking and restore the angle parking on the west side of Broadway that once existed before the streetcar was actually there. So this was one of the opportunities to restore that angle parking. Obviously, pedestrian accessibility and crosswalk width was considered. But in the absence of being able to move those buildings out even wider, I mean, we've minimized the lane widths at 11 feet. We've put in the minimum number of lanes. We've put in the bulb outs. We've reduced the left turn lanes to maximize each of those different modes. So from a pedestrian and from a vehicular and from also a consideration of the streetcar, we think we've accommodated all those the best we can in the existing corridor.
Okay. It still strikes me as odd that you would take sidewalk space for the sake of cars in this project when, and let's clarify this, the diagonal parking there is free parking, paid parking on Robinson, paid parking on 8th. The paid parking lots on 4th and Broadway are fairly underutilized. The parking garage on 5th behind Heartland is underutilized. The parking lots in the alleys behind most of these shops are underutilized. Now, they may be paid parking, there may be some aspect of permit, they may be signed as UZO or Trek Store only parking, or Oklahoma City Community Foundation parking only, which they only ever use between 8 and 5. There are potentially other options or zoning or parking lot sharing options that could be considered to gain the parking back without having to take away pedestrian space from the sidewalk. That's my main point.
So again, I mean, these are just some of the comments that we got from the stakeholders and the business owners that are in the area. I've received those comments also just from Automobile Alley.
The desire for
leadership.
free parking right in front of their shop.
The desire to increase parking opportunities on Broadway with the inclusion of angle parking on the west side of Broadway.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions on this from the board? Let's proceed with a vote on this to receive this preliminary report. It's been moved and seconded. Please cast your vote.
Where's the, okay. Thank you.
Very good. This passes. Thank you. Thank you for the discussion on this. Next item is 3B, sidewalk projects. Oh, sorry. So where are we? I'm sorry.
You got this should be C.
Okay. I'm sorry, this is 3C, sidewalk projects, and this is not Brock Minor, this is Mike Clark.
Thank you, Mr. McKnight. Item 3C1 is up next, and much like the resurfacing category, the sidewalks are largely completed. Even the alignments that appear in red on the map are mostly finished and simply working through the city's acceptance process. Most of the remaining sidewalk work is occurring in the downtown. As a reminder, the chief intent of the downtown sidewalk project is to infill missing connections and to provide ADA compliance as needed. By nature of their presence in the downtown, these require a significant amount of coordination with existing businesses and residences, as well as ones being proposed in the near future. The downtown sidewalk project is approximately 80% complete. Item 3D1 presents a map of the bike facility projects. As you can see, most of the bicycle infrastructure projects are currently in design or a public outreach mode. You will notice the map still includes the Wilshire and Villa Central projects as future, even though the board removed their funding in an effort to balance the budgets of other bike projects. Staff still feels strongly in the need for both projects, and we are actively seeking other funding opportunities for both. At present, our partners in the Parks Department are moving forward to convert the design of Wilshire into a trail to connect between two other trail projects. Work has been completed on the Chartel connection into Zach Taylor Park, and staff is coordinating with ODOT to bid the first phase of the Deep Fork Trail. Work is also ongoing in sections of General Pershing and Southwest 25th. Design is underway on Villa North, Independence Grand, Southeast 59th, and Spring Lake. A public petitioning process in advance of Traffic Commission action is currently in play for the Main Street section of General Pershing and Lottie. In addition, we learned recently that Friends in Planning submitted the Indiana Linwood project for grant consideration, and it was approved to receive an amount of $211,000. For item 3D2, I would like to introduce Max Harris from Planning for a short presentation on the city's Watch for Me program.
Hello, Board. Thank you for having me this morning. So my name is Max Harris. I work in the Transportation Planning Program, an associate planner there. And I was asked to give a brief background and update on our bike and pedestrian safety campaign that we have ongoing. Last time it was brought up, there was a question about what the city is doing to try to get more public awareness out there about bike and pedestrian safety. This is some information on that. Just kind of as a why we need to do this, just broad look at collisions all across OKC. There's tons of collisions every year. This is over a 5-year period from 2015 to 2020. We don't yet have all the data from 2020, so we expect with the pandemic and Mr. Karkfang, you alluded to an interesting anomaly there. We don't yet have all that data, but we do have kind of an idea so far of that. So this is up to 2020, and this is a really broad overlook, but it just kind of illustrates the problem, right? So that is on the left a Oklahoma Highway Safety Office map. It's a public interface that anyone can access. And then on the right is taken from our Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan, Bike Walk OKC, and just really gives, again, a citywide overview of the density of collisions through that heat map and fatalities that have occurred. And that one is 2003 to 2015. So that's over quite a long period of time. And then that chart below just shows the data in another way. There are a lot of different takeaways that you can kind of pull from this, but this is sort of a time of day. That black line is the sunset, so you can see, kind of clustering around that sunset, and kind of tells a different story about the lack of lighting and some other elements as well. So just kind of to start off there with the collision situation.
Technical question on that map, Max. So with regards to the locations of this crash data, or the source of this crash data, is it mostly, say, police reports that provide this information?
Yes. So the Oklahoma Highway Safety Office is a state agency. So they're a branch of the Department of Public Safety, and they get data from, I believe, all municipalities and counties across the state, and they put that in one giant database, and then you can kind of query it down to the city. So that's just what I've done here.
Okay, and if we were to say in-depth crash analysis of, say, a few data points, from police reports that I've seen, things may get scored in a couple of different ways. There's an aspect of a crash located on this street near this intersection, and that might get scored as a crash at the intersection. Or if there's the level of depth in the police report or accident reconstruction, that it was 230 feet west of the intersection, which might allude to a streetlight issue as opposed to an intersection aspect. Is that level of fidelity in this data, or would some of those crash points be simply scored at the intersection?
Yeah, that's a good point, because sometimes a point can be located pretty close to an intersection, and you sort of have to make an assumption of whether that is at the intersection or whether it's a crossing near the intersection that was not, sort of a protected walk signal. So there is a little discrepancy there. I will say this data, when we downloaded it, provided latitude, longitude. So it was,
okay.
It was seemingly pretty precise, but again, I don't think they have a GPS out there, the officers. I think it is, just a product of the report that they do, the paperwork that they do. So there is a little bit of grain of salt in the locations, but, taking a more kind of broad look and broad takeaways, you can definitely pinpoint locations that are in more need of some kind of safety infrastructure or something. So,
for instance, that heat map on the top right is still accurate. The data is accurate enough to generate a good heat map to that effect.
Correct, yes. An interesting takeaway from that heat map too is the heat, the green to red or blue to red, doesn't necessarily correlate with fatality. So, you know, from that you can see that downtown has a lot more collisions. The occurrences of collisions are more numerous, but the severity or fatality in this case is not necessarily, you know, more collisions happen, but since downtown is generally slower and more pedestrian friendly in general, those collisions that happen don't tend to be as bad as say some of the, you know, most of the other fatal collisions that occur throughout the city. So the chances of it being more severe or fatal outside of the core, the urban core area, is greater. So just again, one of many kind of takeaways you can kind of draw from this data.
Yeah, I appreciate that insight, and similarly, it would be interesting to see a similar, an analogous heat map that's normalized by, say, traffic volume for the area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, any more questions about collisions? Yes, sir.
This is a 5-year study, correct?
Well, sorry if that was a little confusing. The one on the left is the last 5 years. That's what the Oklahoma Highway Safety Office provides in their public interface on their website. And then the one on the right is from Bike Walk OKC. And that's the same data, but we got it through ODOT. And, you know, that was a collection of those past 18 years or 17 years.
Have you noticed since homeless has increased greatly in the last several years, and since most homeless folks are either walking or riding a bicycle, has there been a correlation with the increase of homelessness with the increase of collisions?
It's a good question. I don't know that we've gotten that far in detail in the last few years. I should mention Bike Walk OKC, our master plan is being updated currently, and we are looking at, you know, basically that top right ends at 2015, and we are taking this newer data and kind of trying to incorporate it in. So I think, again, a lot of conclusions that you could probably find with that. I think homelessness is certainly a factor, and in general, and I'll get to this a little bit more vulnerable road users in general is something that we want to look at. We don't have necessarily one-to-one data on that, but it's certainly something to take into consideration.
Thank you.
Federal data, I think, going up through 2020 has shown, and I think, two interesting aspects with regard to traffic fatalities. There's the aspect that over time, deaths of occupants of cars has been decreasing, but deaths of those outside of cars, your vulnerable users, the pedestrians and bicyclists, has been increasing.
Yeah.
So that's a federal trend as opposed to an Oklahoma City trend.
Yeah, so it's absolutely worth noting that Oklahoma City is not unlike a lot of other cities that are like us around the country that are built in a car-oriented, auto-oriented way. You know, this is, I don't have a bar chart on this slide, but if I did, then it would show an increase for us in, you know, a general trend of increasing for collisions and fatalities, and that's not dissimilar from the country writ large. So it's certainly a problem that goes beyond Oklahoma City, but we want to try to tackle it here. So, okay, so a little background on Watch for Me OKC. We got a federal grant in 2015 that allowed us to kind of kick off this concept, this idea of a bike and pedestrian safety campaign. And so that's kind of the logo there, and you see kind of we had different materials, print materials and water bottles and different giveaway things that we would table events and, you know, talk to people and kind of pass out some useful information for people. And then we would do some, you know, more fun things, like we went to the Ymca summer camp here, and that's Josh Vaught, our Spokies bike manager, and he was showing kids how to air up tires. So a lot of community type of engagement there as well. In 2020, that money it was pretty much all spent up, and we began looking for another avenue to fund our efforts here. So we came across the Oklahoma Highway Safety Office, and they had a grant cycle that's specifically for just safety education in general. And we noticed that Tulsa and some other organizations and agencies have kind of used this as a route. So we partnered with ACOG, the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, our metropolitan planning agency, and they were interested in doing this too, so we did a joint grant with them, and we ended up receiving that grant. The city got about $50,000 and ACOG got about $75,000. ACOG wanted to kind of take this metro-wide since they deal with the suburban municipalities as well, so we both had interest there, and we received the grant, and ACOG put out an RFP, and England PR was the firm that was hired to sort of recreate this campaign and to kick it off and run it. So they did, and we spent some time kind of talking with them and developing for them to develop this for us. And you'll notice the logo is a little bit cleaner and modernized, I guess. And so it says "Watch for Me OK" now. ACOG is kind of taking this metro-wide, like I said. We kind of do want to keep "Watch for Me OKC," so we have that in our print materials and stuff still. So they built a website for us, and this is a great interactive website, watchformeok.org. It has, of course, all the educational information. It has resources for different localities and organizations and individuals to take from it. So it's a good resource hub. And they've also been doing social media ads, so Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, taking out ads and starting to drive this campaign. So on the right, you kind of see the real focus on safety. This is an illustration of what an intersection looks like. Here are the points where conflict is most likely to happen. Make sure you're aware, of this type of situation for where pedestrians are crossing and cyclists are riding. So that's important information. It's definitely a focus. But then we also do have a little bit more holistic approach where we talk about bike-friendly businesses and kind of make the case for investing in bike infrastructure and stuff. Bike-friendly businesses increase sales and foot traffic and et cetera. So that's all information that we kind of want to include as a package in this campaign. So aside from just social media, we also have some TV ads, some local, partnered with K4, News Channel 4, and made a video. They were able to kind of produce it for us and air it, and so it was aired on TV, on local stations, and on YouTube as well. And then we had some personal stories, some personal experiences from people and interviews. So Mr. Lozano was injured while running, and so he kind of tells his story, and we felt that was a really good thing to show people as well. And then print materials. Right off the top, I think it's important to note one thing. So this has safety tips for drivers, for bicyclists and pedestrians. We wanted to advocate that we really focus the majority of it on drivers. And that's because, again, the watch for me in this scenario, the me is kind of directed as bike and pedestrians. And they're, again, the more vulnerable users on the road, and there's a little bit, you're kind of weighing responsibilities here. So it's important to kind of note that at top, although we certainly have an obligation to provide cyclists and pedestrians with tips to better keep themselves safe as well. So we have print materials here. These are informational kind of flyers, and we have ordered thousands of them, so we will have them to give away for the next coming years. And then we also printed them in Spanish as well, and again with the intent to kind of pass these out to public-facing organizations and locations around the city. And then we have, other print materials that are more geared towards kids, and if we do something like the YMCA again, or work with schools, or organizations that work with schools can use this to give out to kids and to kind of focus there as well. So other grant purchases, again, we have the ads and the social media presence and everything, but we also were able to purchase a couple of bike and pedestrian counters. This is something that we kind of appreciate the Highway Safety Office being flexible with. They've never really funded something like this before, but we did feel it was important to, to start to collect data on where people are biking or walking that we may not know about, that it may highlight something that we don't know about and we want to focus some attention there. Or two, and this is just as important, I think, where we do have infrastructure coming or planned, we want to start collecting data there so that we can kind of show over time more usage. And if we can start to kind of build that data set of safer infrastructure means more people biking and more people walking, then those investments start to become, it starts to really make the case for more of this type of infrastructure. So we think counting, we're kind of starting this counting program, and we hope to kind of kick this off in the spring. And then also we were able to purchase 95 bike helmets. That's the maximum we could purchase with this category of funding that we had. So the bike helmets, we were able to purchase really good quality, Giant brand helmets, and we had a shorter timeline on giving those away. So whereas we're able to kind of keep the print materials and distribute them out over years, the helmets we had to get rid of pretty quickly, or we had to get distributed meaningfully pretty quickly. And so we partnered with Bike Club OKC. Bike Club OKC is a nonprofit. They work with schools. They do training courses. They take kids out on bikes in the neighborhoods around elementary schools. So they really do some great work. And at the end of the program, at the end of the school year, I think, the kids get to keep the bikes and the helmets. So we were able to come up with an agreement where we just gave them all of our helmets, and then they're going to incorporate all these helmets into their programming in the coming years. So we felt that was a really good use for them. And then this is the last slide I have. Is just going forward. So we do plan to continue distributing educational materials at different locations and attending events and distributing there and talking to folks onward and for the foreseeable future. And as far as the media campaign goes, ACOG, we kind of let them take the reins for this next grant funding. So they applied for, for basically what we partnered with them on last time, and they just received another grant from the Oklahoma Highway Safety Office to kind of just continue this going and, have assured us that we could kind of stay as a voice at the table and help guide it. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are there plans to translate the materials into Vietnamese as well?
Something I think that we should think about. We certainly have a very large Hispanic population, but we also have a really significant Vietnamese population as well. And so if we can do that, I think that may be something that we can ask ACOG about this next time around and see if they can do that as well. because I think all we need to do, they created the material for us, and all we did was, order them through the print shop. So if we can just get a version of this that's in Vietnamese, then we should be able to do that. But it's something we do need to look into further.
Max, certainly appreciate your couple of things. In our city, we have a city ordinance that is a HALO law or rule, regulation that basically says an automobile, when it passes a cyclist, has to give them 3 feet. There's not much public awareness upon that. That's an area that's a certain vacuum that hopefully somehow that can be reached out. Would love, not to, since we're a little short on time today, I don't want to take a bunch of time, but maybe you could come back and address us on that HALO law and how we can work toward ideas to make it more public awareness. Also, we know that a lot of accidents occur with cars with people texting, which is also illegal. But again, not much public awareness on that. I think those two things, if addressed, could certainly save lives, and would love to get ideas in the future from you on that and some statistics and how we can reach out to the public to let people know you have to give a cyclist 3 feet, and it's not wise to be texting while you're driving a car.
Yeah, absolutely. Those two things have, they have been part of the process specifically too. Not every ad or social media post, but certainly we have included that 3-foot law in some of that messaging. There's also some new some new state laws that now allow cyclists to treat a red stoplight as a stop sign if the coast is clear, knowing that not all signals will detect cyclists. So that needs to be made clear a little bit as well. Stuff like that's sort of new and people may not know about is important as well. The texting and driving was something in that K4 video. There was actually a scene, it's a little bit theatrical, but there was a scene where, it was kind of filmed from the inside of the car and the driver was texting and almost runs a stop sign where people are crossing, and so it's kind of a message about don't text and drive. So that certainly has been incorporated as well. There's always more we could do and new ideas of ways to do it, so I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you, Max.
I think ultimately, I think I'm the person that probably has raised this question as far as the community and the awareness of all that we're doing for bicycle safety. But it seems to me like still public service announcements, if we have a video, that's great. How do we afford the airtime to show that more often? There's just so much out there. We've provided an avenue to keep him safe, but we necessarily haven't made the drivers aware of what their responsibilities are. And so to me, it's still, as much as we can get out and television work or however is the most visible. And YouTube's great, but not everybody's on YouTube. And internet access is great, but not everyone does that. But a lot of people watch TV. So that would be the thrust that I would be interested in. It's just education of the public as to this is a new era and a new time, and we have a lot of people walking, we have a lot of people on bicycles, and we just need to know what our responsibilities are towards them.
Absolutely, yeah. To your point, on the kind of first generation of Watch from AOKC, we had radio ads, and the radio ads pretty much with exceptions, one type of mode listens to radio, and that's people in cars, right? So that was really directed towards drivers. I think they're looking at, as I mentioned, ACOG's new grant cycle, they're starting to look at Spotify ads now too, kind of recognizing that not everybody who drives listens to radio. A lot of people listen to, music on Spotify or whatever. So I think that's all very important to keep in mind as well.
My mic on? Okay, it is. I just wanted to ask, are we able to put signs in neighborhoods and areas that we know are high bike traffic? Like, I think
just seeing the green line doesn't register with drivers a lot of times.
Yeah, so with this grant, it doesn't fund infrastructure like that. That was one of the things we were interested in, but the Oklahoma Highway Safety Office doesn't. They said they didn't really do infrastructure, street infrastructure like that. But, you know, for this body and for other programs that we have, we certainly can look into signage and with our bike projects that we have going now with, you know, through this sales tax project, I think signage is certainly something that we do have incorporated, and, you know, it's more of a standard bike route or bike lane type of signage, but we can always look into different types too, depending on the circumstance of the bike route. So.
Thanks.
Certainly on this committee, we've allocated budget and had the city implement some really great signs around our bike trails, which provide route navigation as well as rules and yielding that's a little bit more trail specific and not as driver specific. I know the Traffic Commission is fairly limited in their reach, that they can include stop signs or other traffic controls or speed bumps, and potentially share the road signs, which aren't very clear either, or maybe bicycles may use full lane, but it's not quite as educational about like how to use a protected bike lane. If you're a driver and you're turning right and there happens to be a protected bike lane there, how do you use that? That'd be interesting to pursue some avenues or think about some avenues and how we might make that messaging more pervasive.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sort of is one of the goals as well as with the education campaign is you're going to start seeing this new type of infrastructure. You know, here are the city ordinances around it, and here's how you're supposed to interact with it. So again, I think I would stress too that public education is not the end-all be-all. It's, you know, the most important way to reduce collisions and severe collisions especially is to invest in safe infrastructure. But this is an important piece of the puzzle and a place where we can fill some of those gaps, I think. So. I'll turn it back over to Mike. Thanks again for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Max is a great young man and does a great job for us. We're very, very privileged to have him with us. With regard to item 3D3, the Villa North project is being designed by Michael Hoffner of Traffic Engineering Consultants, and Michael has assembled a team of professional engineers to assist him. In addition, Michael and Max have met with area residents interested in the outcome of the project. The Villa North project on our list of approved bike projects represents an alignment that generally follows Villa from Northwest 10th to Northwest 62nd. Internally, it has been combined with an unlisted bond project to upgrade ADA and sidewalks at the Northwest Expressway and Villa intersection. Collectively, these projects make up one of the matches for the grant awarded to the city for the Bus Rapid Transit project. The design for Villa North recommends moving the section of bike lane from Northwest 23rd to Northwest 30th out of the Cleveland neighborhood onto Villa and upgrading it to a Tier 2 facility. In addition, other variations to the alignment, for example, perhaps 30th compared to 36th, and Altadena instead of Young's, will be considered in greater detail. Villa North is funded at $751,000, and the bicycle infrastructure portion of the project has been estimated at $467,000. This preliminary report identifies other work such as resurfacing, signal improvements, and grade upgrades that will be prudent considerations as final plans are developed. Staff is also looking to coordinate other already approved projects, such as the 2017 bond project to resurface Villa from Northwest 16th to Northwest 23rd to take advantage of synergy offered by both projects. Furthermore, it is believed the MAPS 4 sidewalk program potentially offers the opportunity to include sidewalks to complement our area. For example, 30th from Classen High School to Swatik Park, that would be a key asset to those living in the Cleveland neighborhood and surrounding areas. Again, please share any questions or comments you might have, and we will try to answer them.
This does require a vote.
So a couple of notes on this project. I got a fair amount of feedback from some bicycle commuters in my ward. One in particular who would absolutely love that you mentioned the idea of enhancements on 30th between Villa and Swatek Park. That definitely has a whole lot of potential merit of potentially taking Young's all the way down to 30th and 30th over to Villa. He's noted in particular that drivers between 30th and 35th or 36th tend to treat it as a bit of a shortcut for their routes, and anecdotally, it seems like speed limit adherence is pretty low. So having sharrows on that section is not necessarily a big preference, especially if we have so much between our estimated cost and our budget. Looking at enhancing to really good infrastructure as opposed to just paint for route finding is something that I'd highly encourage. There are some bike commuters who already do the rerouting suggested here over to Altadena. There's definitely some good merit to that. I'll contest two things on that note. Number one, if it's already fairly pleasant to go through a neighborhood, then maybe our infrastructure of paint there is purely a route finding aspect as opposed to enhancing the safety of the environment so much. With the 39th Street District Enhancement Project, I didn't quite see in the report when the field study was conducted, but I'm curious how the timing of that plus the 39th Street District project tied together. The bump outs and pedestrian infrastructure around Young's and 39th is looking really good right now, and I agree with the report's assessment about the uphill on Young's, making a left turn and then a right turn that can be kind of challenging, but I'd certainly love to maybe look at that again and see what we can do to combine this bike route with the street enhancement project to really create a unified design that reminds drivers that it is a pedestrian commercial district and then would be safer for bikers to continue down Young's.
I think, for me, it's a blessing. A lot of boards don't have this kind of conversation, so you guys really are very beneficial for us. And based on past experience, I can almost guarantee you there will be a meeting this afternoon to talk about Automobile Alley and the merits that you saw in recommendation 2, and what do we do about that. This discussion of Young's and Altadena, as you said, the guys have worked on that for hours, and pros and cons both ways, and you are correct. 39th Street project went from having a bike lane to sharrows, but then the configuration of the road did change significantly. So I do think with your input, which is very beneficial, staff is always kind of looking for that, how do we create the safest infrastructure possible? So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and the designs, the preliminary designs down Villa with the buffered bike lane look like they'll be really helpful. I think the report identified just about all of my problem spots with road surfacing. So it does seem like a very thorough report, and I appreciate all the work that city staff did on it. I think two of the other concerns, number one, at 30th and Villa, the current configuration of 2 lanes going northbound that then has the left lane turn into a left turn only lane leads to cars or drivers who may not be familiar darting over to continue straight. And now with this proposed design with the buffered bike lane, there would only be 1 car lane, so there wouldn't be as much, say, darting in that direction. It might be even clearer for drivers too. So I think there's a good benefit there.
I think the guys have already started talking about both 23rd and 30th and how do you transition into and out of those sharrows into bike lanes. So I think that conversation has started already.
Yeah, and I think some of my residents in my ward were also concerned about that continuation. If we were to continue up Villa past 30th, then you get a blending zone, colloquially known because of a blender, where the bike lane traffic has to merge into the motor traffic lane in order to continue straight. And there's the contention of potential right-turning cars on 30th. Whereas if the bike lane at a tier 2 or tier 1 level continued through that intersection, there are some pretty good standards for bike lane continuations through intersections that mitigate some of those blending concerns. So mixing from bike lane to Sharrows north of 30th is concerning. So that might lead more desire to continue the route along 30th over to Young's. And then I think one of the other major concerns was with the Altadena route, getting across 36th without a signal could be a concern. I have a friend who used to live on 36th and was very happy to move away because of the speed of cars going through. I would love to see a future bond project or maps for take a look at what it might involve to completely enhance 36th and make it safer. I think 30th is a higher priority for my ward. So if we were to say go all the way down to 30th, I don't want 36th in the future to never be considered again. But I think the priority is getting across 36th safely.
Well, that's appreciated, thank you.
And again, I appreciate the thoroughness in the report.
Any other comments? It's been moved and seconded. Please cast your vote. Thank you. Passes. Next item is 3E. Trails.
Item 3E1 is an update for projects in the Trails category. The majority of the Trails projects are under construction or complete. Bids have been received on the new Hefner Trail project, and the project can be completed in budget. The pre-work meeting was held last week, and it is expected the contractor will start grading operations as soon as the site dries to an acceptable point. Remediation work continues on sections of the Katy Trail after a private utility repair, and finishing work on the Oklahoma River North project is being coordinated with an adjacent bridge project.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
Do you have an update on the signage that's being put at the Burt Cooper Trail at Lake Hefner?
I don't, Mr. McKnight, but let me get one and I'll provide it to the board through email. I know that they have been actively working, so let me get you an update.
But nothing yet has been actually, I know they were working on the mile markers at one point, but not to my awareness, is there any signage that's actually been erected?
Okay, let me find out for you.
Thank you.
Item 3F1 asks the board to approve a February 22 update to the implementation plan. Even though the board has not taken any actions today that alter funding allocations, an update is required to place into the implementation plan the budget sheets for the 8 resurfacing projects you approved last month. No financial allocations change because of this update. I will try to answer any questions if that wasn't clear.
It's been moved and seconded. Please cast your vote. Thank you, that passes. Next is a financial report. Mr.
And for
Hutchinson.
item 4A.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I would like to introduce Ian Hutchison, who will provide the financial summary for February.
All right. Good morning, board members. Ian Hutchison, Office of Management and Budget, here to present the financial report. So this is through December 31st, through the end of the calendar year. And during the month, there was $106,000 more in revenue collected, with about 70% of that coming from interest and another 30 or so coming from sales tax reallocations. So those are the only changes in revenue. Under expenditures, current allocations stayed the same this month, which just means that no new money was allocated to any projects that wasn't already allocated. Total expenditures did increase by about 1.8 million, with most of that coming from street resurfacing projects, about 1.3 million coming out of street resurfacing from various projects, including about $500,000 on the North MLK from Northeast 36th to Northeast 50th Street project. And that is the financial summary. Happy to answer any questions about it.
It's been moved and seconded. Please cast your vote. Passes. Thank you, sir. Next would be director's reports.
Good morning, Jeff Butler, Planning Director. Just wanted to thank you all for your comments and questions. As Mike mentioned earlier, they're very much appreciated, and we will take them under advisement and scrutinize the projects as they move forward. So appreciate all your discussion. And you know, as we bring projects forward, it's nice to have you all that are, you know, you drive in certain areas, you walk in certain areas, you're familiar with different areas of the city. So we appreciate your input from just your experience and your conversations with others. So with that, if there are not any questions, I think that's all that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Next, 6, comments. Comments from the board.
If it's all right, I've got 2 comments, but I wouldn't mind waiting for comments from citizens if there are any here.
Well, no, go ahead.
So I wouldn't mind if citizens go first, if there are citizens. Oh, okay. Well, in that case,
Are there any citizens that would like to speak?
Okay. Unrelated to the projects we've talked about today, there are a couple of, I feel, pressing concerns around the city, and I'm curious what avenues we might be able to take. So with that, Mr. Butler and Mr. Winger, some questions for you. When it comes to, say, a pipe replacing or a power line aspect or a small road construction aspect, where it's required to put up cones and signage to change lanes, to temporarily close the lane for that construction, what's the sort of process or the advancement in planning such an operation? Are there notifications of the pending construction going out to the neighbors? Are there aspects, say for instance, if neighbors might be concerned about their water pressure, that you reach out to them first as well? Can you just talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, happy to respond. Anytime there's work in the right-of-way, the city does require a right-of-way work permit, and that would include any of the franchise utility companies that would be like OG&E, ONG, AT&T. But it also includes city crews and city contractors. And so if you're interested in seeing those that have been requested and approved on okc.gov under the public works portion of the website, we actually have all of those work zones that are approved on that website on an interactive map. You can click the dot that's nearest the location that you have interest. It'll tell you who pulled that permit. It'll tell you the date that they started and the date they anticipated a completion. Now, there's a lot of times where you get into utilities that are making emergency repairs. It could be a water line that breaks. It could be power service that's out. Obviously, in those cases of emergency, there's not time to get a permit pulled or put something on the website. And that's been pretty active over the past couple of weeks, especially with some of the inclement weather. But I would suggest that if you've got a resident or a constituent or somebody that you're talking to that has a question about any of the permitting that could be in their neighborhood or on a street that's not on that website, to please contact our city's Action Center. You can reach that at 297-2535, or they can email action.center@okc.gov. And if they'll inquiry on that, we can follow up and locate who the responsible party is and communicate that back with that property owner or that resident.
Okay, thank you. I noticed in particular there is a bit of a project going on Shields around 25th, just north of the Bond Bike Lane project that completed. And I think it involves some level of street resurfacing, support for the slip lane, maybe some interaction with the train line that goes by there as well. And there's the significance that this project in particular is on Shields. And naturally, there's an aspect of signage well ahead of time to motorists that there's upcoming construction, that there are cones to help guide them merging into the other lanes and things of that nature. My major concern is further south of that point. Looking at some more news-related data sources of crashes, of where crashes are reported, between around December 20th and January 25th, there were 11 crashes between 25th and Southeast 59th on Shields alone. There was one pedestrian killed at 44th in late December. There were several other crashes at 44th and Shields. And in early December, I mentioned this at the last meeting, there was a bicyclist at 38th crossing the street in front of a daycare who was hit and killed. Hit and run, allegedly a red Mazda, if you have any information. The case is still wide open. It's certainly tragic, and this happens to be on Shields, which is 3 lanes in each direction plus a center turn lane, so 7 total lanes in order to get across that street. Going a little bit further, this is on my commute. I cross Shields at 36, so 2 blocks away from where that bicyclist was killed. On my commute, multiple times last week, so two or 3 days in a row, I noticed a woman in a wheelchair going down Shields on the eastbound side. There's a sidewalk on the westbound side, but this woman's needs happen to be on the eastbound side. So without a sidewalk there, she ends up going in the rightmost traffic lane going against traffic. And she has lots of high visibility reflective material on and things of that nature. But her needs are just not getting served by the infrastructure. And I'm worried about her. I'm worried about the crash trends on Shields alone recently. And even more so, the traffic counts in that area on Shields. I think the ACOG data goes to 2018 for that corridor. It's about 19,000. Which isn't small, but that is easily supported by 4 lanes total, not even a dedicated turn lane. I think 5 lanes, so if you add a dedicated turn lane, the midpoint that serves, according to the regional guidelines, 5 lanes supports 28,000 cars per day, so 50% more than currently. So thankfully for this woman, there's very little traffic, and it's not a problem for drivers who are aware of her to change lanes without even having to tap their brake, just because there's low traffic. My hope here, my need, I'm not going to say can we, I'm going to say what will it take to put in some sort of temporary aspect to provide her and the area traffic calming measures, a right-of-way, a temporary barrier so she has some safety in that area. I mentioned the construction on 25th, where there's no problem putting up a sign and having cones to get traffic to merge, and with that level of traffic, no impact to level of service. So could we back those signs up and do a temporary pedestrian or temporary lane closure to cars until we get a bond project or something more permanent, or at least a pilot project in the interim, just to provide some level of safety there. And this is where I really need your help. I don't know what our inventory is on jersey barriers or signage. I don't have the expertise on what taper lengths are necessary to help support merging at certain speeds. I am worried a little bit by what I've heard in other groups about the outrage of traffic violence in their community, that non-experts might do something tactical urbanism related without that expertise. So I want your help to implement some rapid temporary project to provide some level of safety on Shields. In particular, Shields, especially because of the low traffic volumes. You might notice in the Bike Walk OKC plan that one of the bigger north-south corridors, there's Robinson, and there's also Santa Fe. Santa Fe is one lane in each direction with 1,000 or 2,000 vehicles per day, so very low, very calm, through residential, very easy to bike on. The Bike Walk OKC plan would suggest Sharrows for that as route finding because it's already pretty calm and safe. And I'm less interested about providing money to support route finding. I'm more interested in providing safety on roads that can easily support it based on the traffic levels, with destinations that people want to go to, the youth center, the daycare, the church that is right there on 38th where the bicyclist was killed and where this woman in a wheelchair has no option but to go in the street. So I'm begging for some help in what we might be able to do to help address this in the very near term.
Yeah, I think in response to that, I mean, obviously the City of Oklahoma City does a lot of strategic planning. A lot of that planning is done around the City Council and decisions that are made by them as we plan things like the Better Street, Safer City program that we're here today for. I think there is a commitment from the council for better and safer streets, which is, again, why we have the 2017 bond program. We have the 2017 sales tax program that's a part of the funding for this body. And we're implementing those projects. There's also Bike Walk OKC that helps plan and guide sidewalk and trail and bicycle construction, and so it's based on a level of priority, and we're actively pursuing that type of construction citywide, both in neighborhoods and on arterial streets. And so as we move forward, I mean, staff will absolutely do our best to implement the projects that are guided by council and boards like this one. As we get ready to plan for the future and future requests, I mean, there will be future bond issues and future initiatives that will be undertaken by the city. We're actually within about 4 years of finishing out the sales for the 2017 bond program, so I would suggest to you that the planning of the next bond issue is actually in the foreseeable future. It's not 10 years out, but it is a couple of years out, and we can start those initiatives with you as stakeholders and other community members that are invested. To answer a couple of quick questions, though, I mean, there are processes to closing lanes and to availability of materials. If there's a concern with any of the traffic work zones in Oklahoma City that are not laid out properly or that are confusing, we do have city inspectors that will go and inspect to make sure that they meet the requirements of the MUTCD. It's the Manual for the Uniform Traffic Control Devices that Oklahoma City follows to make sure that it's clear and safe. For temporary closure of lanes, we're able to do that for events. We do that regularly for races, runs, and different things throughout the city. But we're really not in a position to where we've got an active inventory to close something more permanently without additional resource or guidance as such, like a project, something that would take a complete lane of traffic out of Shields without study. Not to say that there's not a need, but I would suggest that future planning and creating a project would be our best next step to really addressing the issues that you've brought up, through your observation with missing sidewalks or lanes of traffic, or maybe a reconfiguration of streets. Very similar to what you've done over the past few years here.
Would it be possible for, say, a resident of the city to propose a permit for a 90-day continuous event, or to propose 90 different events that just so happen to take up one lane of Shields?
So
would that be something possible?
So we have processed revocable permits like that. I mean, I would just use something like Thunder Alley on Reno Avenue that it's not currently one that's been approved, but in the past we had a regular closing of Reno Avenue for all home games. So yeah, that can be submitted as a special event. I mean, we'll review that. I would say for those that are maybe considering that, the city does not fund the traffic control and fund the event itself, so whatever security, materials, equipment, volunteers, things that take to run those events, it's that the applicant is responsible for providing those. But again, yes, an application could be made for something like that. We could review an application if it were received.
When say OG&E needs to temporarily close a lane of traffic for the sake of overhead lines or something, does OG&E have their own inventory of construction signs and equipment as opposed to needing the city?
Yes.
Okay.
Either that or they rent them out. So there are several traffic control companies in Oklahoma City that is their primary source of business. When we have an event packet that goes out, it actually lists for the applicant who those companies are so that they can contract with them directly. But most contractors either own their own equipment or they rent equipment from those contractors here in Oklahoma City.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome.
On kind of a similar line of thinking, towards prioritization of future projects through bonding and things of that nature, I really appreciate at the last council meeting, Mr. Wenger, where the project for a cycle track down Broadway or E.K. Gaylord, that wasn't part of that particular agenda element and that will come again in the future. But I do want to address a couple of concerning things that I heard from a couple of key members during that meeting. In particular, my daycare happens to be just through that corridor, so I happen to bike on Broadway from Oklahoma City Boulevard up to 4th. And thankfully, it's another very, very, very low traffic corridor that is not a problem for me. I feel perfectly safe doing it. However, I know I tend to be a bit of an exception to most cyclists. I'm not necessarily what the majority might align themselves with as a interested but concerned or nervous to pursue bicycling. With regard to congestion of exiting a parking garage, this is again a challenging thing to hear where there's so much that many seem to value convenience at the expense of safety of so many others. In the past, I've led cycling instruction programs that would show people around Oklahoma City what routes are safe to take, how to best position themselves in the lane for visibility, how to signal, what the laws are, and things of that nature. And in one of my programs, 2 people who live 7 miles away from downtown, they would drive to work every day, and after my program, they realized how easy it is if they find the right routes and the right roads to go on at the right time of day in good weather. They feel very comfortable biking to work. And so with the right education, with escorting them individually on my own time, I've been able to show people that, yes, bicycling is something you can do, provided you do all the steps that I do any day that I bike. I think about the weather. I think about what my route looks like from a driver's point of view. What are the sight lines? What happens if I encounter a bike lane that hasn't been cleared of snow? Do I feel comfortable riding in the street there, or do I need to find another route? If I find another route, sure, there are paved roads, but what are the traffic levels on those other routes? All of these questions go through my mind every day and dynamically as I find challenges on my way to work or to daycare or to grocery store or what have you. It takes a lot of effort to get around without a car. It's very doable, but it takes a lot of effort. And on top of that, I mentioned the death of a cyclist and several other pedestrians on my route to work. Why am I not going to change my route? Because after years of exploring the city, of customizing my time of day of travel, of things of that nature, I have already found what I find to be the safest route to get there, and yet still there are deaths. One of the nice things about being in a car-centric environment where there are roads everywhere, if you end up with a road closed sign, or if there happens to be a car crash up ahead, or if there happens to be a traffic jam, you can feel comfortable changing your route and knowing that there's going to be another road you can take there. It might be a little bit more inconvenient, but there's going to be another thing available. My route to work by bicycle, just to be safe, is already, it's a 15-mile route from my house to my work, and 3 of those miles are out of my way to choose safe infrastructure to get there. That's an extra 10-ish minutes of my time dedicated to commuting safely. So I apologize if I don't seem sympathetic to congestion about parking garages. And those in leadership need to acknowledge the importance of the research and development that went into the Bike Walk OKC plan to create a comprehensive network of safe infrastructure so that if there happens to be some glass in a bike lane in one area, or there happens to be, I don't know, a thunder game with interesting traffic patterns that impact my bike route through the area, I'll have confidence knowing with the complete bicycle network that there will be an alternative. And every little piecemeal project that says, oh, we don't actually recommend a bike lane here, say Portland between 10th and 23rd, that takes away from the potential of that complete network. It makes it harder for those who are interested but concerned. The majority of folks, I talk to so many people who want to bike, but the only way they do is if they put their bike in a car and drive a mile to the trail to bike. The complete, safe, convenient network is key to reducing the congestion you find in your parking garage. And I cannot state that strongly enough. So I'm really looking forward to the presentation in the summer when that project comes up, and I'll do my darndest to be there. Thanks.
I do have a question. When Maps 3 built the West River Trail from Lake Overholser south to the river, at a point that trail washed out, was closed for I think a year and a half almost, long time. Part of the delay was trying to figure out who would be in charge of that repair, that realignment. Finally, a decision was made that Maps 3 still had some funds left over, would be in charge of that. Moving forward, if there are problems on the trails, does that come under Parks and Recreation as far as future repairs go? And Maps 4 only has $8 million, so there's not going to be any trails to speak of built with that money. We still have a lot of strong need for trails, especially in southwest Oklahoma City.
So once trails in Oklahoma City are actually completed and put into operation, yes, they become the oversight of the Parks Department, but as repairs and maintenance and future extensions and things come into play, Public Works usually will take the lead on that unless there's a specialty program like MAPS that helps with the construction. So day-to-day maintenance and operation is the Parks Department, but usually project construction and repair ultimately will be Public Works. On the section of trail that eroded and basically fell into the river, it was a very complicated project. It wasn't a pothole. It wasn't just a simple washout. It wasn't, utility that undermined a portion of the trail. I mean, it was a long section of trail that was taken out of service. And it did take some time to realign that trail to come up with the right solution. And the solution that you mentioned where the MAPS office assisted in that was the one that was ultimately made by the city. So it just depends on the severity of the trail maintenance that's required as to which entity of the city would take that forward. But I speak to you just from a real general sense. It would start with the Parks Department.
Minor stuff would be with the parks, major stuff would be with Public Works then.
If it turns into a project, then yes, it would be a Public Works project to assist, since we would help with either the city crews doing the work or possibly the bidding of the project to a contractor.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments from board? Next would be 6B, comments from staff. And we have no citizens. Greatly appreciate all the work that city staff does on these meetings and all the work that we've been able to accomplish, and certainly appreciate everyone being here on the board today. We are adjourned. Y'all stay safe. Thank you.